Hello. So, we've had quite the interesting week in terms of a patch. It wasn't very large, but god, that doesn't mean it wasn't substantial. And that's what I'm going to be going over in this video. Talking about the patch and the changes, and pretty much the thoughts on each of these changes and people's responses to it. But most overall, at least in my opinion, it's purely positive. But that's because I'm totally not biased, and it totally isn't one of the biggest indirect ramp buffs that this game has ever seen. Totally not. And then, after talking about the changes in the patch, I've got a bunch of clips or gameplay for people to enjoy. Weirdly, I actually played some Tyranno Titan for, this patch, just to at least get not a good grasp, but at least, a decent understanding. Just don't expect more Tyranno Titan gameplay in the future. I better temper your expectations there. But, with all that out of the way, I hope you all enjoy. So, starting off, I want to go over the things that actually received the most amount of changes, which I would say is actually Tyranno Titan. It ended up receiving a nerf to its basic bite, receiving a bleed nerf from 0.55 down to 0.4. Meaning that now instead of it taking 4 bites to max someone out on bleed, now it's going to take 5 bites. Or technically 6, since by the time you actually reach that 5th bite, they'll have already healed off a bit of bleed, meaning you may actually need a 6th bite to max out the bleed on whatever you're fighting as Titan. This comes across as to promote Titans into actually, just going in a bit more often in order to stack up their bleed, in which means there's more chances for them to actually take damage. So to me, that actually just sounds fine. And next up is a change to Tyranno Titan's voice call, Terrifying Presence, which reduces all incoming damage by 15% for 60 seconds. And the change they made to Terrifying Presence is they made it cost a lot more stamina, from 8 stamina up to 20, so I think that's like 2.5 times, right? This was pretty much just to make it so that Tyranno Titans weren't just auto-picking Terrifying Presence, face-tanking an enemy until they got a bunch of bites or got slightly low, and then were also able to still just outstam whoever they were fighting. This is to push people into actually managing their stamina a bit better, and avoiding people just cheesing the entire, I'm super tanky and I can just always get away whenever I want. In which, talking about getting away whenever you want, let's talk about Skydiver, which also received a nerf. It may still say 40%, reduced fall damage, but it ended up getting cut in half, so now it only takes 20% reduced fall damage. In which, this is what the old Skydiver used to do. And now, this is what the new Skydiver does. And yeah, that is a significant difference compared to what it used to be like before. And I've heard quite a lot of responses to this, usually negative in terms of the nerf about Skydiver. And usually the main reason is that people, say, now I can't really get away from Megapacks. This is what I used to do on Tyranno Titan to get away from Megapacks. But here's my thought, what about the Megapack that's also using Skydiver, Tyranno Titan themselves? Usually they're going to outnumber you, and then they do the exact same thing you do in terms of just jumping off a cliff, and then they just catch you and kill you anyway. The only difference is now, in terms of these changes, it's less effective against every other Apex that Tyranno Titan is going to face. Because before, you'd fight a Tyranno Titan, and then maybe you'd get it low, but then it just jumps off a cliff and gets away, and now the fight's over. But if you want to get close to old Tyranno Titan Skydiver, you could always just use Terrifying Presence again, and use the 15% damage reduction that comes from that passively, which also affects fall damage. But to get away with this, you are going to need to do some stam management and some cooldown management for your Terrifying Presence. And lastly, my favourite change to Tyranno Titan, totally not for any biased reasons, wink wink nudge nudge, but they ended up changing the hunger drain on Tyranno Titan, up from 60 minutes down to 40 minutes in order for a Tyranno Titan to start taking starvation damage. And that combined with the changes, to the player bodies and critter corpses giving less food, is quite a big change for Tyranno Titan to actually, stay fed. I ended up playing Tyranno Titan for about an hour earlier, and I ended up noticing that I am always on the hunt for food. But this didn't mean that I was ever really even feeling pressured or in any trouble to actually stay fed whatsoever, because, hey, the direction that Path of Titans has gone has made it very, very easy for carnivores to stay fed, due to the amount of critters that spawn around the map, especially if you find an alpha critter. And thankfully for Tyrannotitan, it's practically like the best critter killer in the game. You just do one basic bite and one heavy bite. But if worse does come to worse and you find a curious den, you can activate that, hit it a couple of times, let the, the critters spawn out of the burrow, and then you just kill them, and you just let it spawn until, well, you've had enough food. Like what you're seeing on screen right here. I ended up finding a curious den. This was a Silosaurus, curious den. I let them spawn out, I killed them, and I've got very, very easy food. And from just, these two Silosaurus, I was able to just fully fill up my hunger, and there was just no issues whatsoever. However, that does change quite a lot as soon as you get Ramp into the picture with Plague, turning that 40-minute timer for starvation for Tyrannotitan into an 8-minute timer, if it's practically, at max Plague for the entire duration. And to simulate this, I ended up going into single player on Tyrannotitan since I didn't have a friend at the time who would hop onto Ramp and plague me out until I died. And so I found out how fast, Tyrannotitan would actually starve out in single player, and then I increased that by 33% since single player and official servers are not in line in terms of, stats. This puts the starvation timer on Tyrannotitan in line with the official servers, and then afterwards I ended up increasing the starvation rate by 5 times to simulate being plagued out by a swarm of ramps. And what you're watching right now is me at 8 times speed, just starving out from full to empty. And yeah, as you can see, throughout this 8 minutes of walking, it is going down immensely fast. I am not able to get very far whatsoever. Obviously, I could be actually trying to get food, but this is just an example in single player, so why would I do that? The choices to get away from the ramps is same as before. You either enter a home cave or you log out, and the ramp can't do anything about it. The only difference is if they have something to actually keep you in combat, of course, same as before. There are some things you can do to buy yourself some time by actually popping the ramp's lucky feather, and that is that if the ramp ends up, pouncing onto you and hops on, say, your right side, what you want to do is start moving backwards and to the left with precise movement while also turning to the right. And then as soon as they end up hopping off, you can practically get a hit. And then, of course, the same can be said for the left side, in which then you just do the exact opposite movement. Will it work every single time? Probably not, but hey, it's better than nothing. Every time you end up popping a ramp's lucky feather, you've given yourself 4.5 minutes in which it's a bit too risky for them to actually try again until their lucky feather comes back, especially when you know the movement in order to hit them on the dismount. And so next up, the changes to player bodies and critter corpses when it comes to the amount of food that they give. And apparently, they already ended up doing a test to make sure that this would go alright, and weirdly enough, no one even noticed it, or at least a very, very small minority of people actually noticed it. I didn't even notice it at first until a friend ended up telling me that, hey, are these bodies giving way less food than usual? And obviously I just thought it was a bug at the time, but still, it wasn't even a problem. Because, let's be honest, is anyone really struggling after these food changes to stay fed? Especially when, you're not playing as Tyrannotitan and starving in 40 minutes. I severely doubt it. But all I can really say about this change is that it is one of the biggest indirect buffs to Rhamphorhynchus that I've, seen in this game in a while. And I mean, of course I would say that, because Rhamphorhynchus is one of the main things I play. And whenever I've, been starving people out in the, in the past before those food changes, they would just go out, kill a single thing, and then they'd be back to full hunger, and then I'd have to go through all of that, food bar all over again. Now, for an Apex to actually fill themselves up, they'd probably need to actually hunt down, say, at least a 3 slot in order to actually fill up their hunger, after maybe like 4 or 5 minutes of plaguing. It ends up discouraging, people actually mega packing, since, hey, how are you going to keep everything fed at the same time when everything is a 5 slot that eats so much food, right? It practically forces, any mega pack to basically just turn into a full-on meat grinder or else they end
It
up
was
just, I
at
don't know,
first, but
eating each other.
then it became a problem. Wait, they're sacrificing one of their Rexes. Yeah, they've literally just killed one of their Rexes to feed the other. Yeah.
The only thing I can really see as a real pain in the ass, purely for selfish reasons in my case, is that it could end up pushing a lot of the large groups to always have at least 1 or 2 Thals to protect all of their apexes and all that stuff from getting plagued by Ramphorhynchus, basically just like a guard dog. Because as we all know, as a Ramphorhynchus, there is nothing you can do to actually survive Thal unless you get to water before your lucky feather gets popped.
I'm not gonna lie, I fucking hate how helpless I feel with Ramp whenever a single Thal is around. I hate how helpless it feels. It is immensely frustrating. There were some other changes that weren't too impactful in my eyes, but they were good regardless. So I'm just gonna go over them really quickly without going into too much detail. So first up, we have Metri, and what they did to Metri, they took its basic bite and gave it, well, 25% more damage, or just 5 damage extra on the bite. So instead of doing 20 damage, it does 25 damage. And the dealing 10% increased damage at night, that got moved up to 15%. So, bite is a lot better than before. And so for the last change then to Metri is Noxious Frenzy. Reset all your ability cooldowns, excluding this one, needs at least 15 Noxious stacks to be usable, and consumes all Noxious stacks. The only change they really made to it is instead of needing, 15 stacks, now it only needs 10. So, I guess it's a little easier to, I don't know, keep it active. It's overall a buff for the ability. It's just, a lessened of a condition to actually activate the ability. And so the next one to get some changes was Tylosaurus, and all they really did was kind of just nerf its damage output. So Charged Headbutt got a slightly increased cooldown from 7 seconds to 8 seconds, so it can't spam it out so much. Then there was the change to Hard Skull, which gives it some stamina recovery, but that wasn't touched. All it really does is add an AoE to, Charged Headbutt's actual attack. Say if you end up hitting an enemy with Charged Headbutt, then you'll get a second hit of AoE, which is pretty much just extra damage on top of what you're already hitting them with, right? And before, it was doing half the damage of Headbutt as, on top of the original Headbutt, but now it's only an additional 30% extra damage. So, decent nerf. And lastly, for Tylosaurus, we have Feral Instincts, deal 20% increased piercing damage. Now, they just cut the piercing damage bonus in half, so now it's only dealing 10% increased piercing damage. I think Tylosaurus has only received nerfs since its release. I wonder why. Maybe because it was absolutely insane. I mean, when it comes to aquatic playables, everyone's still going to pick Tylosaurus over Kaifekia and Uranosaurus. I can't remember the last time I saw a Uranosaurus, other than myself. I've seen plenty of Kaifekias, but Uranosaurus not so much. Maybe that's just because everything else either, grabs them or just AoEs them to death. You tell me.
And so to round this video off, how about just some general clips, whether it be fights, funny moments, deaths, me raging possibly. You get where I'm coming from. I'll put a bunch of context at the beginning of the clip with a little voiceover, so why not start with this one? So today I was playing a little bit of Tyranno Titan because I wanted to talk about the Tyranno Titan changes and actually give my honest opinion with it. And so I just decided to travel around on Tyranno Titan and I came across an EO. And so simply put, I just decided to go for the EO. I will warn you, if you're expecting me to be good on Tyranno Titan, I have not played this thing since its release. So I absolutely suck with it. Either way, I hope you all enjoy. And so with the EO dead, there was also a baby Achillobator in the area that was also holding a trophy. And so I just decided to give them the horns of the EO. And in return, they gave me the tiny little sickle claw off of the Deinonychus that died mid-fight. And with that, I was heading towards the cave with the baby Achillo in tow. And so this one was actually really funny to me, because I was playing on the solo servers, just flying around on Ramp, because what else am I gonna do? And I ended up hearing something quite peculiar, which was a Tyrannotitan that was trying to fend off or defend itself from a Ramp. And so, like any good tiny flap, I decided, why not join in on the festivities? Which, as you would have guessed, the Tyrannotitan didn't take too kindly to, but as soon as I ended up jumping off, another Ramp would jump on. And we continue to move north as this Titan's food and water is slowly, or should I say very speedily, going down. And one thing I found a little funny, it's super griefy, this, but they tried to do this quest where they sit down on a mossy patch, but hey, whenever you get pounced, you get forced to stand up, so if you have, like, a raptor or a ramp that's on you, you literally cannot do that quest. That's a little griefy, if I'm honest. But eventually, they ended up moving up to the top pond of Cedrus Forest, and trying to get whatever food out of the critters there, along with trying to fill up their water. But they decided to buck me off first, before then getting the second ramp to also pounce them. But as you're about to notice, as soon as one ramp hops off, another hops on. Now, this is a funny thing about ramp in terms of, like, one versus having 2 or 3 ramps. When it's just one ramp, you kind of have a little bit of breathing room that, you know, the plague is going to drop off while the ramp is getting stamina. But as soon as there's a second ramp, that plague is never, ever leaving 10 stacks. It is going to be maxed out non-stop. Which for a playable that's recently had its starvation timer nerfed severely, that is quite a big deal. Especially more than, say, Rex or, well, anything else in the game, really. And that is probably the reason why, after, chaining together multiple ramps, just keeping the plague maxed up the entire time, they may try and get water whenever they can, but it's kind of just inevitable what is going to happen. And so, after they've finally come to that conclusion, they've made the decision to jump off a cliff. And so for this one, I was trying to show my friends a funny little bug that happens with flyers, and I get hit by a Hatz barrel roll. And so I guess it's time for a little dogfight, but I'm not using any AoE on my Thal right now, I'm using Wing Slap. And so all I've got to really try and do is try and bait out their AoE, or try and waste their stamina. At least until they go to land, in which that's where I can actually do my real damage. I've sped up some parts to this clip due to them, well, just not being too interesting to watch. And so here, Hatz wants to find a better spot in order to fight, in which I know that they're getting pretty low, so I can be a little more liberal in terms of maybe trading with this Hatz. And so for this one, we were on the day of the new patch, and so we've got a group of 2 Ramps and a single Deinonychus. And so the plan here is quite simple. So Ramp's main problem is that it cannot start combat timers anymore, and so it cannot stop people from logging out or entering a home cave. That is why we have a Deinonychus. And so me and Tango will plague a Rex that Indo has found, and then we have Indo to keep said Rex in combat.
Have you subscribed to Starvation Weekly? Okay. Yeah, that seems about right, Indo. He's not even bucking. Oh. Right, give it a second, Tango. Get, before you pounce. When I hop off, then you hop on. Okay, all yours. Oh, run, boy, run. We're going to plague you out, run, boy, run. You're getting real hungry now, run, boy, run. No. Oh, okay. Oh, wait. Indo being a little shit. Oh, I see. He's just out of stam. And there's slicer value.
Now, in Backchat, a lot of people make a little joke about Metri, calling it Big Stol, because, you know, poison stalls out healing, and then it out-heals you, and it makes a fight last forever until you're finally dead. But we have a little joke about Denon, you know, paid with ramps.
Smol Stol. Oh, run, boy, run. Oh, I think he already knows. Okay. I'll take your spot.
Now, there is one small concern that wouldn't really be that significant, and that is that there is a baby Stego and a baby Amarg up front ahead of us. And so, this Rex has been plagued for long enough that it would definitely want to try and munch down one of those. And so we tried to warn them off. And so, while they may not have been able to get any babies, when I ended up hopping on right here, they did end up actually spotting a dynamo critter. But, sadly, while chasing this dynamo around, they missed too often, burned all of their stamina, and just could not catch it. But in the meantime, they did end up killing a different critter, and I think it was one of the crabs that spawned here. So we ended up just grabbing a chunk off of it, trying to, I don't know, reduce whatever food they ended up getting.
Oh wait, he's Descartes. Get him in combat. There we go. No, I still got plenty of stun. We're going to starve you out, run, boy, run. Endo! Oh, he starved. Yeah, he died. Yeah! GG's.
Now, there's a funny thing about this group setup that really resonates with me, right? And that is, like, the significance of actually getting even just one kill with it. And that is that, say if you're on like another dino, say a Rex or a Tyrannotitan or a Stego or anything that's like a 3-slot, getting one kill is like, you know, run of the mill, hey, I got another kill, cool. You know, I'll put that on the, you know, on the pile of the other 200 that I've already gotten. But for me, whenever I see like a setup of just like Ramph and Dinon, it's so significant, even getting just one kill, whether it be on a Rex, a Tyrannotitan, a Stego, or just anything else, really. It is such a big deal because it just doesn't happen that often. And I do have a session that I recorded before the update with Indo, that we were just doing Ramph and Dinon, and that is something I do want to try and get out in the future, just because, I don't know, it just feels like it's a match made in heaven. Ramph does its job of, you know, just being a pest and plaguing stuff out, and then Dinon covers up the entire weakness of Ramph, which is people just home caving or logging on the spot. And that session was extremely fun at the time, and it's something I want to try and get edited soon. So, if I do get round to it, I hope you all enjoy that. And so here we are at the end. So first off, I want to ask, how is everybody actually enjoying this patch? I know there will be some who are not too big of a fan of it, because these are pretty substantial changes in terms of like the food and all that kind of stuff, but I think they are very much manageable, along with, you know, changes to a lot of people's favorite playables. As I said at the start of the video, this wasn't a big, you know, like there wasn't a lot of changes, but I would say they have pretty, you know, a pretty substantial impact on the game. Like, I even ended up seeing Matt in the Discord say something along the lines of, hey, if the player death rate, you know, for starvation goes to around like 10 or 20%, they can officially start like calling this game a survival game in the first place. Because let's be honest, it hasn't been really a survival game for a while, unless you've gone on to like some sort of hardcore actual survival realism server where they've actually changed the food rates. And I mean, overall, I really enjoy the patch. That might be just because it really benefits from my kind of playstyle, but, you know, to each their own. People will still play the way that they want to play, and, well, more power to them. I'll have as much fun as I can while I can. At least until there's enough complaints that end up getting Ramph nerfed. Because I'm gonna pump those numbers for starvation. I'm going to work on pumping those numbers. And I'd like to rally any other people who enjoy playing Ramph to do the same. But is there anything else that I want to talk about? Not really. So, with all that out of the way, I hope you've all enjoyed. I'd love to know your thoughts on the patch in the comments. And I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye.